So excited for all these people to be here. Please put your name, your pronouns, and where you're calling in, zooming in from. We wish we could be together physically on a street or at a headquarters or, power to the people. But I feel like this is the second best thing. And wow, everyone looks pretty good. Woo! Thank you for being here.
And we're going to get started in just a second. Okay, I don't see any reason to wait. If you're just joining, welcome to Defund Deforestation Actionar. Put your name, pronouns, and where you're calling from in the chat. And my name is Debbie New. I'll be talking to you at the end of the hour, but for now I'm going to pass it to Mary Cerulli to kick us off.
Are we sure we don't want to wait for like 1 more minute? It's only 3:01.
Your call.
Oh.
Why don't you start when you want to?
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Cerulli. I'm with Climate Finance Action, and we're proud to curate this Actionar today, powered by deep research from Friends of the Earth, Amazon Watch, and BlackRock's Big Problem campaign. We'll learn about deforestation and its accompanying human rights abuses and the huge corporations that aid and abet these atrocities. We'll hear personal stories and we'll see and feel the connections between public health and local fights for clean energy and deforestation. We will then take action in small groups. I am proud to introduce a true champion from the Global South. His passion for the planet and social justice nearly knocked me over when I met him. His warmth and dedication to a more loving and caring society and people who value the whole ecosystem just exudes from his words and his actions. Alfred Brownell received the 2019 Goldman Environmental Prize for Africa in recognition of his work and leadership with Liberia's green advocates, who stopped palm oil companies from decimating rural communities' land rights and clear-cutting more than 500,000 acres of forest. Even though he was forced to leave Liberia, he's still fighting. And he's with us today. Alfred.
Alfred, you might be on mute.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that kind introduction. And I'm so happy to be here to join everyone who has come to join us to make sure that we send a very clear message to BlackRock and all of those asset managers that are supporting and funding destructive activities across the world. Last year, 2019, I wrote BlackRock a letter demanding that they stop investing in destructive activities in my home country, Liberia. They have provided funding and support to a company called Golden Verolium that was clear-cutting almost 300,000 hectares of forest land and destroying the home of indigenous communities. They were also providing support to another oil palm company called Sam Darby, who was also clear-cutting another 300,000 hectares of forest land. And we informed BlackRock that those investments were failing and there was a need for them to withdraw from those investments. Since 2019, BlackRock is yet to acknowledge the letter that I sent to them. But guess what? We have not stopped fighting. I managed, along with indigenous people, to stop one of the companies, actually slow them down for trying to destroy 1 million hectares of pristine forests in Liberia. If you know what Liberia is, it represents 2 of the largest forest blocks in West Africa, the largest carbon sink in that region that we refer to as the lungs of West and North Africa. It is the only strip of forest land that is protecting that region from the encroachment of the desert that is trying to consume those communities. But the investment that BlackRock and others are supporting are raining serious terror on local communities. People are being arrested, people are being imprisoned, people are being intimidated. I myself had to escape assassination attempt by the company when the 150 of their paramilitias surrounded my vehicles and tried to cut off my head. They have arrested people, beaten them, tortured them, put them in prison. Women have been arrested, have been stripped naked and sent in prison. Now, because of the campaign, all of a sudden, they have now worked with government and captured the part of the government to continue abusing our people. And wildlife is being threatened. The forest is being threatened. People's livelihood are being threatened. So today I call upon you to join us to demand BlackRock, first and foremost, to respond and acknowledge our letter and defund deforestation. We demand BlackRock to continue to support protection of the people and the planet. So I want to welcome all of you to this meeting, and I'm happy to be part of this process, to join all of you to advance this cause. Because guess what? We are in this boat together. The destruction that happened in Liberia and deforestation that occurred in Liberia is coming to face all of us today. The science is very clear. How destruction of forests implicates pandemics, implicates global health, implicates erratic climate processes. So all of us are facing those crises. And it is time that we get together and support indigenous people who are on the forefront advancing the protection of forest ecosystem. Thank you so much for joining this meeting. And I'm looking forward to interacting with you more as we continue this action. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. I'm just going to jump in. Maybe we could see the slide right before this, because this is a picture of Alfred's kids. So if you could, Charlie, if you could just go back one slide to slide number 2 of the kids, that would be great. There. We wanted to let Alfred show you his kids in San Francisco at an action.
With BlackRock, it was the same day we received the prize. And I took them out to go and protest, because it's important. You see, when it comes to protecting the planet, there's no child soldiers. Every single person's matter, even the future generation, is part of that struggle to protect the planet.
Indeed. Maybe this is where I jump in. I'm Jeff Conant. I direct the International Forest Program with Friends of the Earth US. And that picture that we just saw with Alfred's kids was at a protest, the first protest we organized in San Francisco at BlackRock's headquarters just in April of 2019. To really draw attention to the financing behind this issue. And I'm going to briefly walk us through sort of the big picture, the big global picture of the deforestation crisis, which is a crisis that, as we say, lies at the crossroads of climate, human rights, and biodiversity. If we could get the next slide, please. Deforestation is the second largest driver of the climate crisis after fossil fuels. We're losing an area of forest globally the size of the United Kingdom every single year. And the main drivers of the crisis are agro-commodities, or what we call forest risk commodities, namely cattle, palm oil, soy, and paper pulp, and a few others in lesser measure. And to describe how that happens, I just wanted to bring up this sort of simple graphic that shows you have a healthy tropical rainforest, which stores massive amounts of carbon, is home to countless species, and is home to countless indigenous peoples. And those forests are basically cleared, often using fire. This is in Indonesia, in the Amazon, across West Africa, West and Central Africa, forests being cleared and turned into wasted landscapes, essentially, and then planted with industrial farms for palm oil production, paper pulp, soy, and so forth. So you're taking massive biodiverse carbon-rich forests and turning them into green deserts and monocultures. Next slide, please. And if tropical deforestation were a country, it would rank third in CO2 emissions after China and the United States. It's a way of saying that there is no way through the climate crisis without addressing the deforestation crisis. Of course, trees both sequester carbon and maintain climate stability, and we can't afford to lose any more. Next slide, please. And I'm sorry I'm moving through this so quickly, but that's what's called for here. Another piece of the deforestation crisis is, of course, in order for agro-industry to get a hold of the land to clear it for forests, most of the lands in the global south that are being cleared for concessions are owned and used by local communities. And one of the impacts of this is an epidemic of human rights abuses and an epidemic of killings of environmental and human rights defenders worldwide. In the picture here, you see Berta Cáceres, who I knew personally and actually nominated for the Goldman Environmental Prize. She won the Goldman Environmental Prize in 2014, and tragically she was murdered in Honduras in 2016 and kind of became the face of the epidemic of killings of land defenders. She is only one of roughly 4 land defenders who are killed every week. So we're really doing this work partly as frontline human rights defense. And next slide, please. Of course, and these are pictures of a couple of communities that I've visited and that we've worked with who are at the front lines of fighting the plantations. Of course, in order to get to the land, the companies need to be complicit with killing some of the leaders, but also displacing and marginalizing people from their lands. And what you see here is on the left, a community in Indonesia. They're holding their land titles. These are people who have legal title to their land, but they were tricked by a local official to give those land titles to a bank as collateral for their land. And now, as you see in the picture, this is their land. It's essentially an oil palm plantation. So they've been displaced and in many cases turned into day laborers on their own land. And then on the right, you have a picture from Cross River State, Nigeria, where the company Wilmar International, which is among the largest palm oil companies in the world, came in to clear land upon which these people were living and continue living, and they're obviously not happy with the situation. So just to say, a major piece of the problem is what we call land grabbing. If we could go to the next slide, please. And I think now, yeah, we're going to see a video and hear directly from some of the voices speaking to the investors in deforestation.
State Street, BlackRock, Vanguard.
As empresas que você investe, que você financia,
están quemando nuestros bosques.
Companies you own
are taking our lands.
As empresas que vocês financiam
estão ameaçando nossas vidas.
You have the power to make them stop burning down our forests.
You have the power
de evitar que sigan amenazando nuestras vidas.
Respect the rights of indigenous peoples.
Respect the rights of indigenous peoples.
Respecter les droits des peuples autochtones.
Respeten los derechos de los pueblos indígenas.
Pare de financiar o desmatamento. Agora.
No más fondo para la deforestación. Ahora.
Defund deforestation. Now.
Okay, to wrap up my piece of the program, I'll just finish by saying we, Friends of the Earth, has just published a report we'll put in the chat called Doubling Down on Deforestation, How the Big Three Asset Managers Have Enabled Consumer Goods Companies to Destroy the World's Forests. And we're really zeroing in, as we will going forward on this Actionar, on State Street, BlackRock, and Vanguard as the 3 largest financiers of deforestation in the US, and upon whom we are about to take some action. So thanks for listening, and I'll pass it on to the next speaker.
that would be Dr. Regina LaRocque from Massachusetts General Hospital. Regina, your turn.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group, and I'm thankful to all of you for what you are doing to protect the forested lands of the world. I think we've heard some powerful information about how this is about protecting human rights and about protecting Indigenous people. And as a physician, I'm here to point out that protecting the Earth's forests is also about protecting the health of everybody. I'm a member of a group of physicians called Climate Code Blue, and we declare that the climate emergency is a code blue, an emergency for the Earth. Next slide, please. So why do I, as an infectious disease physician and scientist, care about deforestation? Well, I think that all of us in the last 6 months have come to learn the reality of what we infectious disease doctors have long known and long discussed, which is that a lot of the organisms that affect animals that exist in ecosystems in forested areas are in fact able to cause pandemic disease for humans. We have seen now COVID, a disease, emerge to affect the entire global population. And these are the types of things that we have been concerned about and have observed for many decades as spillover events from the types of land use changes and environmental destruction that takes place in association with deforestation. We know that many diseases that we are familiar with, mosquito-borne diseases, insect-borne diseases, fungal diseases that exist in the soil are profoundly affected by land use changes and by climate. And I'm showing you here just a few examples, some of which we're very familiar with here in New England, including the tick-borne diseases. So this is not just a problem of the global south. Next slide. And aside from the concerns about infections, frankly, forests are fundamentally the lungs of the earth. Trees clean the air of particulate matter. They produce the oxygen that is a key component of our atmosphere. They are our lungs collectively. Next slide. And when these areas are burned purposefully for commercial purposes, it creates an imminent health threat to the people who live in these communities. This is a picture from the Amazon. Next slide. But now here in the United States, we are beginning to understand personally what it looks like to live and breathe the air resulting from burning with the wildfires in California. Next slide. And my last point is just that heat-related fatalities are really becoming increasingly an important component of our concerns with climate. Clearly, we know that trees and tree canopies are essential to cooling and to keeping people protected from heat. So I'll stop there and just underscore that this is a public health issue as much as it is a human rights issue as well.
Thank you, Regina. John, over to you so we can hear about another aspect of the problem.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm John McKibben. I'm the video director for Climate Finance Action. And we've been working on a video here for a few days about the products that come from the rainforest. And it was a big surprise for me realizing that there were so many well-known brands that were a part of the harvesting of materials from the rainforest. So let's take a look at this this video.
Ten years ago, the companies behind these brands committed to stopping deforestation by 2020. Instead, they've helped to increase deforestation, stripping resources from the Amazon and forests all around the world. Their suppliers take land from indigenous communities, attack land defenders, and set fires to clear land for plantations. These huge agribusinesses produce palm oil for our snacks, soy to feed livestock, beef, and wood for paper products and textiles. Household brands like Procter & Gamble, Mars, Nestle, and Unilever are responsible for human rights abuses and massively accelerating the climate crisis. But they all have something else in common. They all get their money from three giant investors: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. These big three have no plans to address deforestation, and given opportunities every year to make the companies they invest in address deforestation, they routinely vote no. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street can use their enormous investor power to make these brands honor their commitment to halt deforestation. Hold the big three accountable. Demand they stop the destruction. Hashtag defund deforestation.
Okay. So, so that's a work in progress. If you have comments on it, let Debbie or I know. So, you know, as you can see, there's a lot of different brands there, and you know, I could stop eating Oreos or stop feeding my cat Friskies or something, but that's not going to solve the problem. So, you know, obviously, instead of trying to organize a boycott of all these brands, we're much better off targeting the financing and targeting, you know, where they get their money: BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. So, so that's the plan, and I will just pass it on to Laura.
Hi. Hi, that was an amazing video. I'm going to talk with you today about another wood product, wood for energy, which is also known as biomass energy. The growing demand for wood pellets in Europe and increasingly Asia is driving enormously harmful logging practices around the world. Next slide, please. Currently, next slide, thank you. Currently, the United States and Canada are the largest exporters of wood pellets. Whole trees, like the ones that were in the previous slide, are cut down and transported to pellet plants. Next slide. Where they are chopped up, ground into pellets and dried. Next slide. And then shipped overseas to power plants like Drax in England, where they're treated as renewable and zero carbon replacements for coal. Drax, which is the largest biomass power station in the world, receives more than $2 million a day in clean energy subsidies for burning wood. Far from being clean and green, biomass energy is extremely polluting and harmful to the climate. Let's start by debunking a few of the common industry claims about biomass. Next slide, please. The biomass industry claims that burning wood is carbon neutral. In fact, wood-burning power plants emit more carbon dioxide than coal plants for the same amount of energy. They claim they primarily use wood residues, such as sawdust and logging slash, to make wood pellets. In fact, much of the wood comes from whole trees. They also claim that wood is sustainably harvested and that active management, aka logging, is good for forests. In fact, the type of logging that is done for biomass harvesting is extremely destructive. Next slide, please. Forests in the US Southeast are being stripped bare to produce wood pellets. As you can see, companies will go in and hoover up every last twig. And much of the wood is coming from trees that are considered low value wood because loggers can't use them for saw timber, but they have incredibly high value for biodiversity, carbon storage, and other forest functions. Incredibly, clear-cutting forests or creating tree plantations is not considered deforestation unless they're converted to a different land use like agriculture, but the impacts are functionally the same. We're seeing similar practices wherever biomass harvesting takes place. Next slide, please. This is what sustainable forestry looks like in Maine. Next slide, please. In Nova Scotia, next slide, please. In Estonia, next slide, please. And we're also seeing a steep increase in illegal logging, especially in national parks in Eastern Europe. Next slide, please. So here's another reason to target BlackRock. They are one of the largest investors in Drax. Biofuel Watch is leading a campaign to urge BlackRock to divest from Drax and to recognize that forest biomass energy is not a climate solution. We urge you to join us. And now Moira Burse from Amazon Watch is going to tell us more about BlackRock.
Thank you so much, Laura, and hello to everyone. My name is Moira Burse. I work at Amazon Watch, and I'm going to talk to you about what this whole BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard asset manager thing is. You've heard some of the other panelists throw around those names and that term, but folks on this webinar might not be familiar with those names or those terms. So basically, an asset manager takes other people's money, say individual investors or maybe a pension fund, and pulls it all together and invests it in investment funds, most commonly in what are known as index funds. And these are not actively managed. So they might say, okay, we're going to follow an index, we're going to throw a bunch of stocks in it, and your money is there, right? And so it tracks the ups and downs of the market without being very strictly and very regularly managed. So next slide, please. You've heard the names BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street today because they are the big three, the top three largest asset managers in the whole world. And a big part of their power comes from the amount of money that they manage. That is to say, the amount of money that they direct into or out of companies. And so when they have money in those companies, they can use that influence to push companies to do things. That's known as shareholder power. And the reason that these big three have so much power is that because they pool money from so many people and so many institutions around the world, they end up being, say, the top shareholder or the top 2 or 3 shareholders of a company, right? And so actually can really push that company to do better if they choose. And these big three vote on average about 25% of the shares at US publicly traded companies. Next slide. So because of the nature of this business model and the size that I've mentioned, the big three are involved in virtually every major corporation across the planet. So that includes destructive companies like fossil fuels and companies driving deforestation like those that we've heard about today. And BlackRock is the very biggest. It's the world's largest asset manager that, depending on how the market is doing, has about $6.8 to $7 trillion in assets under management. And I just want to ask folks to put yourself on mute. Thank you so much. And so that's part of why we're targeting BlackRock so closely, because it is the biggest. And so if it does better and really pushes companies to stop deforesting, to stop invading indigenous lands, then we can see real impact around the world. And also the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, has tried to portray himself as a do-gooder, as a climate advocate, and as a potential candidate for offices in maybe a Democratic presidency if we end up having one. Next slide, please. As was mentioned in the video that we saw just a minute ago, unfortunately, the big three have done a pretty terrible job at holding deforestation-involved companies to account. Their voting record has been dismal when it comes to supporting shareholder resolutions to address deforestation. In fact, in the past few years, we've seen not a single vote of support. And many of these votes are just on reporting of deforestation, not even on eliminating it. So it's a pretty low bar, and they can't even get there. So this lack of inaction is why all the organizations you see here and many others put together, are pushing the big three to do better on deforestation. And to specifically lay out what that could look like, Amazon Watch and Friends of the Earth put out a set of principles on what asset managers should do about deforestation and indigenous rights, essentially saying this is the minimum floor of if you were going to actually take good action on forests and on land rights, here's what it could look like. And hopefully we can get a link to that in the chat in a second. but that includes things like Indigenous rights, consultation with impacted communities, accountability, zero tolerance for attacks against community leaders, no deforestation, addressing all the kinds of emissions impacts, not just direct impacts, and addressing water and soil contamination issues like from fertilizer pollution. Next slide. So what do we need them to do? I mean, basically, as already has been mentioned, we need them to have policies and we needed them to implement them. So that talks about voting, it talks about excluding the really bad actors that won't change, and it talks about making sure that the default investments that when investors come and say, hey, BlackRock, I want you to manage my money, that the default is funds that don't include climate and indigenous rights destroying and forest destroying companies. So I'm going to pass it now to Sarah because we are going to take action right now to push these asset managers to do better, and Sarah's going to tell us how.
Hi everyone, thank you so much, Moira. You've got me all riled up, and I hope everyone else is now. In a minute, we're going to move you all into breakout rooms to take action, to let these big companies, the big three, know that we're not going to tolerate this anymore. But before we do that, I just want to quickly share my screen with you because the facilitators, hope everyone can see, are going to share this document, this action document with you when you're in your breakout rooms. But I just want to quickly preview it with you first because there are 3 ways that we can take action today. One is to call. And here's the script. I'm just going to scroll down quickly through. This is the script if you want to call. We'll be giving you the phone numbers, and we want you to ask them, demand that they adopt a deforestation policy and vote for shareholder resolutions on deforestation. So this is the script that will be shared with you. We just wanted to preview it with you so that you didn't get too much information all at once. And here are the phone numbers at the bottom. The people in charge of BlackRock, the relevant people at Vanguard, and the relevant people at State Street. This is to call. So I hope you all have your phones all charged up and ready to go. Your facilitators will be taking you through that in just a minute. This is what happens if you want to email. Here's a sample email. Don't forget to personalize it because that makes it so, as we say, impactful. So here's the sample email that you can copy and paste into your emails, into your computer, and here are the email addresses at the bottom. Finally, if you're a tweeterer, here are 3 sample tweets that you can again copy and paste and tweet while we're taking action. And obviously, please don't limit yourself to just doing one. In an ideal situation, we would be doing all 3 to all 3 companies, would be fabulous. And then here are, there am I. What am I doing? Here's some images, amazing, that you can add to your tweets. All right. So we are going to put you into breakout rooms right now and get ready to take action, everyone.
Kathy, you are set up as a facilitator in here. Do you see the prompt for you to join one?
I do see the prompt. I'm supposed to be troubleshooting with the other facilitators. Tracy Burns is in Nancy's room. Can you move her over to my room as a facilitator? Hey, Charlie, did I actually speak to you a minute ago? Okay, so we're set with Tracy. Okay. I'm unmuted. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back from Taking Action. I hope you all had great groups. I'm just going to give it a sec. Again, my name is Debbie New. I'm with Climate Finance Action. And now that you've had a chance to do a bit of taking action, you have all of the things you need in this document to keep going and to share it with other people. So next, I want you to meet David from California. I met him last week on Zoom, of course, and we talked for about an hour about his experiences in the Amazon. You're going to hear from him in a second. We also talked about the powerful way that he's found to pull the finance lever, like you just did, but in a different way to stop deforestation, which is for him is personal. So I'm going to ask Charlie to play the interview. I put together some highlights from our conversation. Hang on just a second.
My name's David. I live in West Sacramento, California. I work for the state of California, specifically the Department of Water Resources. I'm an engineer by position, but I'm a levee inspector as the main thing that I do. If you study this kind of stuff and learn about this stuff, you know that it's all connected. Forests and water and all of that are all part of a big system. We went into the national park of Pacaya Samiria in the Peruvian Amazon. We saw spider monkeys, howler monkeys, black river dolphins, pink river dolphins.
Any piranhas?
Well, I ate one.
You ate one?
Yes. We took a bus basically over the mountains from, it was the coast, and you're driving through, and it was like picturesque, beautiful, like kind of mountainy jungle. And then it proceeded into just barren grassland, mostly for agriculture. It was just sort of like, oh yeah, that's also what's going on here. I'd say what kind of has spurred me to action, it was just, knowing what was being burned, having seen what was being burned and knowing like what was being lost. So then I started talking to my dad about it, and he mentioned that, well, since you are a member of CalPERS, which is basically the largest one of the largest pension funds in the world, the California Public Employee Retirement System, they are a powerful investor. My dad suggested, hey, why don't you write them a letter?
A letter to your pension fund?
Yeah, a letter to my pension fund,
okay,
expressing my concerns about the fact that they're invested with companies that are helping finance deforestation. Before I sent it, I was like, I feel like I should let the people at Amazon Watch know that I'm doing this. And they suggested, why don't you get more CalPERS people involved? There needs to be urgent action. If we can get CalPERS to move urgently, we're talking trillions of dollars here. It would feel like this, almost like, you could say a multiplier. It would feel this, hey, I'm part of something. I'm not alone here. And I would say, hey, this might actually work.
So Charlie's going to take us back to some slides so we can talk about what's next. Like David says, it just might work if more of us do what he's doing. And he just told me that he's got 14 people signed on to his letter to BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street by writing to CalPERS, his pension fund, and more people who are beneficiaries of the pension fund, like him, who want to sign on to his letter as well. Next slide. So we need to go to the slide that shows Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock. While that's happening, I'm going to tell you incredibly, last week, if you didn't hear, Larry Fink, who's the CEO of BlackRock, said, I'm an environmentalist, and there he is. But he leads the world's biggest investment company that's the biggest driver of climate destruction, including deforestation. And then he said, our job is to follow what our clients want. Next slide. And he told environmentalists who've been protesting BlackRock, that's us, to go to the money owners and talk to them and have them change. So who are the money owners? Next slide. State pension funds are huge money owners, like David's pension fund in California. They control large pots of money that are made up of the retirement savings of workers like teachers, health professionals, union members, and many others like David, maybe some of you on this call today. Next slide. These pension funds hire BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street to invest that money. If pension funds don't like how the big three are investing it, they can pressure them to change or fire them. Next slide. State treasurers or comptrollers oversee these funds. And this week, New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer, you see him on the left, he wrote a letter to State Street telling them that they need to do better on deforestation. And we'll share that letter with you after this call. Their role and their power is different from one state to another, but they're important decision makers who can add to the pressure that we're creating. So our what's next is to call our state treasurers or comptrollers to push BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street to change how they invest our pension funds and our money. After this Actionar, we'll send you simple instructions on how you can send a message to your state treasurer. And I invite you to tailor your message with what you're taking away from today. Like David, you can make it personal. Next slide. So let's keep taking action. But before we sign off, I wonder, Roberta from BlackRock's Big Problem, can I give you the last word?
Wow, thanks.
Sorry, is Daniel here?
What an honor. That's what I wanted to check. Daniel.
Okay, let's see if Daniel is here.
I don't see him.
Okay, we asked Daniel Brindis from Greenpeace to say a couple of words, but Roberta's going to take his place. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for this incredible Actionar. I personally learned a lot, despite the fact that I do this work. Like, I feel like today I learned a lot, especially hearing from frontline leaders. Like Alfred was really powerful. And so I am feeling more determined than ever to take action and do anything in my power to keep the big three accountable. Just a couple of things. All the resources that were shared today in the chat and throughout the call are going to be emailed to you, so you can continue to call, email, and make some social media noise like after this webinar is over. Please also forward this information to your friends, get them to act so that we can really tackle together this climate emergency. And then the last thing that I wanted to share is that, you know, as we have learned today, BlackRock has failed on its climate promises. And this action today is actually part of a series of distributed actions that are taking place all over the globe, calling on BlackRock to really take concrete action on climate. And so this is what we're calling a September swarm. And so I really want to invite you all to join the September swarm. You can do so by following our work, and I'll share a link on how to do so. Or you could also host an action if you'd like in your city, if there is a BlackRock office. And also we're hosting a digital Solidarity Day of Action on October 2nd that's going to be sponsored by Stop the Money Pipeline. And so that's another great way for you all to plug in and continue to keep financial institutions accountable for their role in driving the climate crisis. So with that, I just wanted to thank you all again for taking the time to being with us today, taking action, and really yeah, just like reminding BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street that we're not going to leave them alone until we see concrete action. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Charlie, for doing our tech. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you to our fantastic speakers and breakout room facilitators. Let's keep taking action. See you around. Thank you very much. Bye. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was
Great
fun.
afternoon.
Many thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Debbie and your team.
Question.
Thanks, Kim.
Question.
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
How do we save the chat? I'd like to do that.
I'm not sure if it works on this call for you, but if you go down to the bottom of the chat.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, you got
it.
Okay.
There's a lot of good info there.
Yeah.
I copied and pasted the things that I needed to save.
Excellent.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to sign off. It's been great.
All right there.
Here.
There.